Before we start our episode today, this is just a reminder. History Hack does have a Patreon account and all of your donations are gratefully appreciated. There's lots of perks on there, secret groups on Facebook. Do get involved. We would love to see more of you. Enjoy the episode today. Hello and welcome to another Bertie, get down from there. Bertie, you're going to bring the entire BT Skybox thing down. Get down.
That has to stay in the intro.
Bubble.
Hello and welcome. This is a mess already because Bertie's misbehaving. Hello and welcome to History Hack. We can do this. We can be grown-ups, girls. Right. We are here today, me and Merrin, with someone we absolutely adore because she's just wonderful. Merrin, who is it?
Today, Alex, we have the fabulous sugar shaking, cake baking, history making queen of 17th century history, the author of Deliciously Decorated and Burlesque Baking, our down the pub regular, our very own Charley White.
Yay! What an intro. Oh my goodness, my head is now so big it doesn't fit in the screen.
So Charley, we are going to talk about a Hollywood cult classic today, a scintillating piece of celluloid. Do you want to hit us with some smooth statistics for Singin' in the Rain?
Oh yes, the Singin' in the Rain. This is going to be an episode full of spoilers, so apologies if you've not seen it, but it was released in 1952, so where the hell have you been? It was MGM's Technicolor musical treasure, directed by Stanley Donen and Gene Kelly as co-directors, written by Betty Comden and Adolph Green, with lyrics by Arthur Freed. In fact, all of the action, the whole film was based around some songs that Arthur Freed had kicking around the lot. We got Gene Kelly as Don Lockwood, Don O'Connor as Cosmo Brown, Debbie Reynolds as Kathy Selden, and Jean Hagen, my personal favorite, as Lena Lamont. So this is going to be it's such a great film. It's so good.
Oh, right, so the budget was $2.5 million. It grossed 7.2.
And that will have gone up and up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because it just keeps on going, doesn't it? It's like, as you said, why have you picked this film to talk about? Very briefly, because we'll get into this in detail, but why is this film important?
I think this film is important because I think it's the ultimate Hollywood film about Hollywood. Hollywood loves telling stories about itself. It loves anything about its own mythology. And I think that today we can have a really interesting chat about what the film reveals about filmmaking, about the studio system, about star power, and those stories that Hollywood tells us about itself.
Brilliant. Let's start at the beginning. Film opens. I mean, it doesn't break the mold, does it? So the film opens with instantly recognizable character types on screen, and we can read these.
Yeah, so straight away, it's got this fantastic device where it opens up on the red carpet of a film that's opening up. And we've got this character called Dora Bailey, who's recording a radio show live from the red carpet. She's very much a Luella Parsons type of character, head hopper, gossip, Hollywood news, that kind of character. And she introduces us to these characters as they walk the red carpet. We've got an it girl flapper type with an older, wealthy husband, and a European exotic beauty, sort of unwelcoming femme fatale. She was based on Gloria Swanson, who at that time had married a European count. So she turns up with this sort of new husband in a top hat and tails. Then Cosmo Brown arrives. He's the talent that nobody is interested in. He just plays the piano. And finally, Don Lockwood and Lena Lamont arrive. They are the stars of the show, the leading man, the leading lady. So we recognize them. These are characters that we see over and over again, film after film.
And then and I think it's interesting to point out that at this time, what year is this? This is 19... isn't it? So yeah. I mean, Hollywood actually isn't that old. Hollywood is only sort of coming of age now. Films the idea of going to the cinema and watching a film is only really, what, 25 years old, really?
Yeah, you're right. So an equivalent film today, being made today, would be set in what, 1996? So this is a film released in 1952, set in about 1927. We know this because the release of The Jazz Singer dates it for us. So it is, yeah, Hollywood. I mean, look, this is a history hack. Hollywood is still a baby compared to a lot of the things that we talk about. But
even by now, the audience has got used to the idea they're going to see a story.
Yeah.
And they're already self-educated into the idea that sometimes they see a story within a story. That's kind of what they expect to see, isn't it?
Yes. By this time, you've got a very, very film literate audience, because going to the cinema is a thing that people do, and they do it regularly. Now, this is where, at this point in the film, having walked the red carpet, we get another brilliant filmmaking device where Don Lockwood is prompted to tell the story of his own success. And he tells this story of, his extensive musical training and, rising up through the ranks of the studio and becoming this big star. But the story that he's telling us with his voice and the voiceover is not the story that we're seeing play out on the screen. And instantly, the film is setting us up for a little bit of a wink and a nod, which is saying to us that not everything is as it seems in Hollywood. We're going to show you one thing, we're going to tell you another, and the audience is savvy enough to recognize that disconnect.
Is that the first time Hollywood's done? I mean, first of all, is this the first time, or this era, is it the first time that Hollywood starts to reflect on its own history, because there is now enough of it to look back to? But also, as well, is it the first time that they sort of admit in film that it's all smoke and mirrors?
That's a really interesting question. So it's not the first film that Hollywood has made about itself, because we've already had Star is Born, which is much older than you think, and we'll probably get onto that a little bit later. But it's in terms of a nod and a wink and saying, look at what we're doing. It's already very self-aware. Hollywood is very self-aware, and some movies are self-aware of this. Singin' in the Rain is very experimental as a film, and in some of the techniques it uses. But I'm pretty sure it's not the first time that the audience has been told that what they're seeing is fake. Very early on, there were articles about behind the scenes in Hollywood. This is pre World War II, and at one point Hollywood got really upset about it, and they thought that people would be completely upset if they knew how the magic was done, then thought that it would spoil the experience for people. But actually what they realized very quickly is that revealing how things were done just turned the audience on even more, and they loved it, and they loved knowing how it was done.
I don't care that it's smoke and mirrors, it's escapism.
That's it. Yeah, willing suspension of disbelief. Yeah. So that didn't affect audiences at all. They loved it. But yeah, Singin' in the Rain it's so clever, and it's got so many nods and winks for the audience. At this point, even in the first 10 minutes of the movie, we find out that the romance between Don Lockwood and Lena Lamont has been fabricated for the gossip columnists in order to sell their movies. So Hollywood's already that aware at that point, still in the height of the studio system. That's not going to break until the early 60s. All the stuff that we talked about with Helen O'Hara in Women versus Hollywood about the production companies and the PR within the studio system being very restrictive on stars and their behavior and their image, they're already that self-aware that they can put it on a film at this point, whilst they're still sort of, sending starlets off to have abortions and having gay actors in lavender marriages so that nobody knows they're gay. So it's very, very nod and wink.
And the other thing that's happened, of course, is by this point, the society has just come through a period of deception. and a period in which it became culturally acceptable to say we're going to get one over on an audience. Through smoke and mirrors. We've had a period in which, you know, the American ethos of, oh, we're going to beat the Jerrys, we're going to get them, has it's embedded in culture now. And you've got a generation that's rebuilding, getting back to where it should be, and reflecting on inverted commas success, because obviously we don't hear a lot about the challenges of restoration post Second World War, but it's getting back to the idea of the boys have come home, we've got to celebrate our success, and the deception that went on to achieve that had become acceptable. So to start seeing the veneer pulled back from the glorious fairy tales that we used to see pre-war in cinema has become something that cinema that cinematographers are completely signed up to now. That they know that the audience is ready to accept deception as a trope.
Yeah, and that is such a great point. Propaganda will always be with us. It's always been there, and we swallow it daily, and it's, you know, it doesn't sort of affect our lives. We take it in, and we understand what we understand, and we peel away what we want to peel away. But yes, you've got possibly a very tired, war-weary audience in 1952, and even during the war, people wanted to see big, shiny musicals, and this is what MGM did. It's escapism. It's just enough of a nod and a wink to make you feel clever.
I'm guessing this is like boom times for Hollywood, because people just wanted, like, it's like COVID now. People wanted their lives back. They wanted to wanted to relax. They wanted to have fun. And like you say, this kind of big shiny musical is about, as I mean, they're playing two games at once, Hollywood, because they're also churning out World War II films before the conflict's almost even over. But they're also feeding into this need for complete escapism and suspension of belief.
Yeah, you're completely right. But then really we need to remind ourselves that this is 1952. And even though films have they have a lead up in terms of pre-production time and getting stuff greenlit, actually within the studio system, that was normally a fairly quick process. We're talking about 7 years after the end of World War II now. This is, you know, Hollywood has very much moved on to the next thing and on to the next thing. And at this time in 52, actually what they're having to start thinking about is keeping people coming to the cinema, because people are starting to get TV sets. And this is where MGM are really gangbusters, because they can do the huge high production values that we look at.
Of course, this is like basically the year, or the next year, is when everybody in the UK runs out and buys a TV set, don't they, for the Queen's coronation? So it really is on a worldwide level. They're
exactly. And funnily enough, Singin' in the Rain did really, really well on TV. It was one of those films that came on TV and was repeated in later years and got a whole new audience that way. But yeah. So, but I want to talk about my favorite person. Can we move on and talk about my favorite character?
Are we going to talk about the fact that this film has a lot to say about beautiful women?
It really does. It has so much to say about beautiful women. Lena Lamont, who I just adore. She's my idol, my absolute idol. She is repeatedly shown, even from that first 10 minutes and Don's little backstory, she's repeatedly shown to be cruel and shallow and just stupid and a bit of a piece of work. She's revealed to be the person who pushed for Kathy Selden to lose her job. She's not interested in Don until he is on screen, until he's an actor and on her level. She asks Cosmo Brown, you know, you piano player, are you anybody? And she gives people value based on their position within the studio.
I'm guessing many people like this do exist in Hollywood.
Yeah. I think they probably knew her. I think they knew her well. We see it again. We see this beautiful woman disconnect again during the Broadway Melody sequence where Gene Kelly dances with Sid Charisse, and she's a gangster's mole. And they're dancing together. It's all very passionate and super, super sexy. And she's literally lured away from him when someone dangles a diamond bracelet in front of her face. So it's saying in no uncertain terms that beautiful women can be bought and cannot be kept by poor fellas, you know.
And I can't believe that actually we're several minutes in, and that's the first time we've mentioned Gene Kelly.
This film is Gene Kelly's baby. This is his. This is all him. The co-directing. He'd worked with Stanley Donen before. I'd always assumed that what happened was that maybe Donen had been signed on to direct, and then Gene Kelly had taken over so much that he got a co-direct.
Like a Kevin Costner and Robin Hood Prince of Thieves scenario.
Yeah. But no, they did work together. They'd worked together before, and because Gene Kelly was choreographing all of those big dance routines and how they would get into dance routines. So the if you're a fan of musicals, the watching the transition between talking action and then going into a big number, and bear in mind that they started with the numbers before they had the script. So working all of these in, like when he does his Singing in the Rain routine, he starts by walking down the street and just humming to himself, and he's doing that because he's just had his first kiss from Kathy. Yeah. Do, 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 do. Are we gonna have to pay for that?
It's gonna go mental. He's gonna be like,
so they've actually thought all this through. All of the songs are authentic to 1927. They all would have been around that time, which is why they set the film at that time. The Make 'Em Laugh is an original number because they wanted a number for Don O'Connor. But so that's it is Gene Kelly's baby. He's all over this film.
I wonder as well, is that not Hollywood, that character and putting that character on, is that Hollywood's way of saying we deal with these women quite a lot? I mean, it's chauvinistic, and obviously not all beautiful women are skanks, but that is, I mean, it is a trope, but it's also something I'm guessing Hollywood pays quite a lot of women off and throws money at them to get what it wants out of them at this point.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And again, I'm just going to shout back to Helen O'Hara and Women versus Hollywood for sort of how Hollywood treats its starlets. But Lena Lamont, she's not stupid. That's the interesting thing about her, is she's a piece of work, and she's got this voice. So for anyone who hasn't seen the film, geez, come on, get with the program. But Lena Lamont is a silent film star who has a terrible, terrible speaking voice that is a disconnect, again, from how she looks. She's beautiful, she's graceful, she's elegant, and she's got this, what do you think I am, dumb or something, kind of voice going on.
It's like that scene in Only Fools and Horses where Marlene goes, I got told I had a promising career in film once. And Boise goes, yeah, and then talkies came along.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And this did happen. This happened to a lot of stars. Famously, Greta Garbo, she has a very thick accent, and at one point they were thinking, what are we going to do with this actress? She's beautiful. Thankfully, I mean, she owned it. She just played exotic types with that beautiful voice. But there was they had a big problem, and huge films were recast, and new stars got their chance through this. So Jean Harlow was recast in a Howard Hughes film called Aces High, I believe it's called, because the leading lady, they'd shot the film in silent. They'd done it as a silent film.
Isn't it, that one? Yes,
it's very, very early. She had a very thick Swedish accent and no one could understand a word she was saying. So we get Jean Harlow from that, but and the term platinum blonde.
And that practice of matching people with their voice, that is something that has gone on after the 1950s, hasn't it? Because if you think about Dave Prowse, Darth Vader, the mismatch there, he never knew that he was going to be his voice was going to be recast until after the film had been finished.
Yeah, I feel for Lee.
Like, why is James L. Jones doing my voice?
Yeah. I sound amazing.
Because James L. Jones has the best voice in Hollywood.
He absolutely does. Other than the voiceover guy,
right?
Sorry?
He's Mufasa as well, right?
He is Mufasa.
In the live pictures. Yeah, he's
yeah, he's amazing.
But even today, I mean, the studios are cognizant of what's going on and what will sell and what won't. And back, I mean, when we're talking about the Singing in the Rain, the studio's plans to publicize the film, the Dancing Cavalier, that would have been detrimental, wouldn't it?
Yes, this is where it's very interesting, and we're talking about star power, which is another thing about Hollywood that Singing in the Rain reveals. So the studio are planning to publicize Kathy Selden, who is our young ingenue, who is the talent behind Lena Lamont. She has overdubbed Lena's speaking voice and her singing voice in the film The Dancing Cavalier, which is again, it was a silent film that they have decided to make a talkie and a musical to make it sell, now that sound is a thing. And they're going to publicize that this amazing star we've got, she was the voice behind Lena Lamont. But Lena is not stupid, as I've said, and she feeds a story to Dora Bailey, our radio gossip columnist, and to all of the newspapers, casting herself in a very favorable light, saying how Lena Lamont is an amazing singing and dancing star. Then she reminds the head of Monumental Pictures, our sort of studio boss type, that she's got a clause in her contract which states that she's got approval on her publicity. And if the studio publicized The Dancing Cavalier with Kathy as her voice, that would have been detrimental to her career. So the studio system of signing up actors to 7-year contracts could be beneficial to the actor, but only if it's a star.
I can't be pissed at them for doing this. I know this is a fictional thing, but this star power is a thing. But there's so much exploitation under the studio system, isn't there? That if they got a counter punch in, I'm like, just go on.
Yeah, it is always nice to see somebody play the system. I mean, if you want stories about that, Elizabeth Taylor was just the queen of screwing over the studio system because she was Elizabeth Taylor. Now, there are plenty of other stories about smaller stars who have absolutely no power at all. They're signed to a contract. It's a 7-year contract. You do the films that the studio says. They can loan you out to other studios. They can put you in films that they think you'll be good in. And if you're good in one, if you're good in one musical comedy, you are going to be doing musical comedies until the day you die. They can also just park you, not put you in anything. If you've been bad, you're not going to work and you can't go anywhere else. You'll keep getting your pay, but you're not going to be doing anything. So when you've got someone like a Lena Lamont type, Marilyn Monroe also became very good at this when she became Marilyn Monroe, as we know her. In the early days, she was getting screwed over like the next person. But once you get to a certain level, you can completely game the system. So she did have, if you've got a clause in your contract which gives you approval over publicity, which Marilyn had, she had approval over publicity, over director, over writer. She could approve every part of her film process by the height of her career, not at the beginning. So once you get to Lena Lamont's type, you can get away with anything if you are valuable enough, and that is star power.
You know what though? This is not that far removed. I've seen the contract that people are expected to sign for things like Britain's Got Talent and that, and it's not that. That's basically what you're signing up to. You're not allowed to go and do any other work without their approval for a year. Even if you just do one stupid audition at the beginning, you signed a thing saying you're basically theirs for a year and they can use you and you can't go anywhere else. I mean, this isn't gone. It's much more regulated, thank God, but it's not.
But do you know what? That is a really interesting point, Alex. There is an argument to be made that reality TV has become the modern day studio system. I had a friend who
everything you've just said about that contract, that's what the contract says. Yeah,
I had a friend who was possibly going to be applying to RuPaul's Drag Race. And again, it's absolutely the same. You have to be at the beck and call of the show, and you can't do anything else outside of that, because you need to be available for things, but you also can't do your own gig and publicize the name because the name is owned by. So that's really interesting. It has
until they've figured out that they can't make any money out of you, your ass is theirs. And like literally they insure themselves for a year afterwards, just in case, you know, the public imagination, you grip it or anything like that. So even if they ditched you, they can bring you back. But if they don't bring you back, you're still there.
That's really interesting.
Although there were differences in the way people were paid still at this time. I mean, this application of contract is king applied to Donald O'Connor and Gene Kelly as well, didn't it?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, that's, again, this is Singin' in the Rain. You have to remember that it is still operating within the system that it is talking about. So you know, in the final exchange between Lena and Kathy, we get the real sort of the real moment where they show that Kathy is completely stuck because she's not a star. If Lena says that she's going to be her voice forever, Kathy has to do it because she has to toe the line because Lena is the big star. Now, Gene Kelly, this is rumor and speculation. There is a lot of this around this film. It has a lot. It's got a lore of its own. There is a rumor that he was using this film as a way of getting out of his contract at MGM because he was annoyed that they'd not given him some lead roles that he thought would have suited him. And there are suggestions that his hostile behavior during filming resulted in him being released from his contract, which he was trying to do. This is all allegedly. So I don't know how true that is, but it's a great story. There's a lot of brilliant stories around Singin' in the Rain, and I so wish someone would make a film about the filming of Singin' in the Rain. It would be meta. It'd be brilliant.
It would. It's one of the things about Gene Kelly that some people may not know this fact. He spent his entire Second World War, he signed up against other people's wishes. He got into the Navy, served with the photographic unit, and essentially spent his war making films, training films, one of which was called Combat Training Fatigue, which was released in 1945. And he wasn't a method actor, but he went off to an institute to find out about PTSD. The guy was he could hold a role. It wasn't all comedy, it wasn't all musicals. Yes, he could sing and dance, but he was actually a really dedicated to his art actor. And Combat Training Fatigue, you can find snapshots of it on YouTube, I think. His girlfriend in that film was Jocelyn Brando, Marlon Brando's sister.
Yeah.
Off the back of his Army, Navy career, his military career, he knew that there was more that he could achieve in film than just singing and dancing.
That is absolutely amazing. This is a whole, I mean, I'm not even going to try and touch this because this is so interesting, but Hollywood during World War II and what the stars did and didn't do is fascinating. If I can do a shout out for another podcast that I think people might be interested in, there's a podcast called You Must Remember This, and she did a series called Star Wars, and it was about what Hollywood stars did or didn't do, Frank Sinatra, during the war. And it's absolutely fascinating because some of them, like you say, like Gene Kelly, they took what they were good at, they took what they knew, and they used it for the benefit. Oh, and another one, on Netflix, there's a series called 5 Came Back. I think it's only about 3 episodes, and it's about 5 Hollywood directors who all went to war and what they did and what they came back with, and it is just phenomenal what they were able to do. So yeah, that is really interesting about Gene Kelly. Well, no one wanted your stars to serve. If you are a Hollywood studio boss, you do not want your leading men going off to a war zone. No way. These are valuable.
At best, you want them actually on screen portraying that to get people into the cinema, to give them some light relief.
John Wayne, yeah.
Yeah, and Gene Kelly, what was it? Anchors Away, 1945.
Yes.
He was alongside Frank Sinatra in that one, where he was playing a Navy sailor on leave.
Yeah. Clark Gable served on bombers until they realised that Hitler really wanted to get him.
Until Hitler wanted him,
keep him in a cage. Yeah.
How I mean, like, it's Hitler, and he's a fucking weirdo anyway. But yeah, it's just like
Jimmy Stewart was a war hero as well. I mean, you know, these
So we started. I think we've digressed.
I think we have digressed.
Sorry.
You two can go off and work up about Hollywood and World War II. But for now,
Brilliant.
Singing in the Rain. Charlie,
Singin' in
this
the
has
Rain.
got a lot to say by Hollywood about the mythology of Hollywood, hasn't it?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it does address the mythology of Hollywood whilst repackaging it and maintaining the status quo. But one that I wanted to talk about that I think is really interesting is there's a famous myth that Hollywood tells about itself that in order for one star to rise, another one must fall. And this is where we get to A Star Is Born. And A Star Is Born and A Star Is Born and A Star Is Born because it's been made 4 times.
Yeah. So 37 is Judy Garland?
No, 37
54.
is older than Judy Garland.
Okay.
54 is Judy Garland. That was when they repackaged it as a musical because, hey, you got Judy Garland.
Yeah.
76 is Barbara Streisand and 2018 is Lady Gaga. And if you really want to see me ugly cry, like proper ugly cry, that film gets me every time. I just love Gaga. But in Singin' in the Rain, you've got Kathy Selden versus Lena Lamont, and Lena Lamont has to be literally humiliated and laughed off stage in order for Kathy to take her rightful place as Don Lockwood's leading lady. And at the very end of the picture, the last shot we get is of a billboard with Kathy and Don on a film together called Singin' in the Rain, but the film is called Singin' in the Rain. Are we in a film or who knows? And there's no place for Lena at all. The last we see of her is her running off the stage. She's literally out of the picture. She's gone. There is no more Lena Lamont. You can't have it is a great, again, it's women versus women. You can't have 2 great leading ladies. That's just beyond the realms of imagination. She has to be defeated for Kathy to take what we see as her rightful place because of her talent. But another bit of mythology that it addresses as well is the right place, right time. So Don Lockwood's story, you know, he's the one that he tells and the one that we see, he becomes a stuntman because the stuntman is rubbish and he offers to help out and then becomes a star because of that. And he falls into Kathy Selden's car, the woman who, in terms of the film, she is the love of his life and they're going to be together forever, we assume at the end. He falls into her car off the top of a moving trolley car, which is awesome. So there are a lot of sort of moments of that mythology. Interesting male-female disconnect. So whereas Lena has to be defeated for Kathy to become the star, in the Broadway melody section of the film, Gene Kelly's character starts off, he turns up fresh off the bus on Broadway and says, "Gotta dance," because he wants to be a dancer and becomes a star. And at the end of that, when he's feeling a little bit worn out and dejected and sad, another guy wearing the same costume comes off the bus and says, "Gotta dance." And so it's almost all right for there to be more men coming through.
It's like a production line, but with the women, there has to be fingernails and
yeah. And he helps that. It's always suggested like he's helping that kid by singing back at him and encouraging him. But with women, it's like, no, you must be humiliated and you must die for me to be the star that I should be. So
what does this film actually tell us about the reality of Hollywood having to do that migration into films with sound?
Yeah, this is, I mean, again, I just wish I'd been in that room. So they've got a handful of songs and they go, these are all sort of, you know, late 20s songs. That's all around the coming of sound. Let's make this a film about what happened in Hollywood when sound arrived. So it's it's a period piece, like I say, to put it in perspective. And it shows all of the challenges that came around the transition of sound coming in. So you've got actors have to get used to working with microphones. The directors are cut off from their sets in soundproof booths. And there's a great director in this. You talk about types. Roscoe, he's the shouty jodhpur wearing D.W. Griffiths type, but he's got to be in a soundproof booth now because the microphones. And again, people like Lena Lamont, beautiful silent era stars without the voices to match. The film deals with so many technological advances of 25 years, a quarter of a century of filmmaking. More even, again, this is why it's so meta and so interesting, more than just the coming of sound.
So, I mean, the film deals with a lot of technological advances, but one thing that hasn't changed is the ability for human beings to be human beings and to train and to become dancers and singers or not singers. And let's talk about, we can't avoid it, we're going to have to build up to it, the singing and dancing that went on in this film.
Yes. Oh God, I love musicals. I'm not even going to pretend. When I saw La La Land on the big screen, it harked back to this so much. I sat in the cinema and I cried. I was so excited. I
bet Chris was thrilled.
Oh, bless him. Yeah, he's just
sobbing mess of a wife next to him.
He's not a musical fan. He puts up with them a certain amount for me, but sometimes I just have to go, do you know what? You are not going to enjoy this. I will go on my own. I will go and watch this quietly in a corner and sob. Like when Hamilton came on Disney Plus, I was just like, look, I'm taking a day off so you don't have to suffer through this. I'm going to be downstairs for 3 hours watching a musical. This will happen. But yeah, so Gene Kelly, obviously huge musical star, and this is his baby, and all the choreography that he did for this. Don O'Connor as well. They matched very well because they were very similar dancers, not in terms of style, but in that they both, I'm not a dancer, so the technical side of this I don't really understand, but they both turn the same way, which is they both turn to the left or turn to the right. I can't remember which one it is, but it's the equivalent of being a southpaw, a left-handed boxer. So they are both slightly wrong in that sense. So they
turning to the right is
perfectly
if you're right-handed.
That's it. So they both turn in the same direction. So that's why they look so in sync when they do it. Jean Hagen, she was an actress, a proper actress. So you'll notice Lena Lamont doesn't do a lot of dancing, and actually that works for her character very well because she's meant to be beautiful but not very talented. But she's a seriously talented, serious actress, which made her in this role even funnier because she played it completely straight, which is just brilliant. Debbie Reynolds is who we really need to talk about here.
We do.
So she was 19 years old when this film was shooting. She wasn't a newcomer because 19 by that time in Hollywood, you're an old person. But she wasn't a dancer. She'd had gymnastic training, so that is good. She's fit, she's lithe, she can presumably contort her body into shapes. That's great. But Gene Kelly had done this trick with Leslie Caron in An American in Paris, where he'd trained her up. He was a teacher as well. It's always almost made to sound like he was this sort of awful influence on the set, but he was a teacher. This is what he did. And he got Leslie Caron up to a certain standard in American in Paris and danced around her a certain amount and made her look really, really good. So MGM said, can you do the same with Debbie Reynolds, please? We want her to be a big musical star.
We should just say that An American in Paris, for anybody who doesn't know, is a ballet within a ballet, isn't it? It's a 17, it was written by Gershwin, 17 minutes long. They performed the whole one-act ballet within the film as almost one set piece. And to do that, the focus on the choreography had to be intense.
Yeah.
So to transfer that across, it makes sense that Kelly would have wanted to get it absolutely perfect a year later, then 52, for Singin' in the Rain.
Absolutely. It was, I mean, An American in Paris is so beautiful. It's completely beautiful. And he did try to bring a little taste of that back in his Broadway melody sequence in Singing in the Rain, because that's, you know, the film within the film, when he says, he describes to RF this sequence he wants to make. He says, picture this, you know, and then we see it. And then that's when we get the Sid Charisse bit, because she was a trained ballet dancer. Debbie Reynolds could not do that standard of modern dance and ballet. So they brought in Sid Charisse to do that. So it's a bit within a bit. Absolutely fantastic. Very, very clever device. But it could be argued.
It's ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
it is. There is a massive irony to this. There's a huge tongue in a cheek, because much of the narrative around Lena Lamont could possibly be applied to Debbie Reynolds. So that idea of all you've got to do is dance around Lena and teach her how to take a bow. That's how we'll make the dueling cavalier into the dancing cavalier. Brilliant. Just dance around her, teach her how to take a bow. Fabulous. Gene Kelly pushed Debbie Reynolds so hard during filming that she was found crying by Fred Astaire, who helped her out with her choreography. I mean,
well, if anyone's going to give you a hand.
Yeah, only in Hollywood. But she said that Singing in the Rain and childbirth were the two hardest things she ever had to do in her life. And I think we do need to take a moment and remember that she was 19 years old. That is, and all of the pressure that comes from, this is a big film with big budgets for the time. They spent huge amounts of money on costuming and on sets, and you've got to get those dance moves right. Yeah, that's not an option to keep going. So it was hard for her, really, really hard.
Debbie Reynolds, of course, Carrie Fisher's mum.
Yes, Debbie Reynolds. I mean,
Hollywood.
She went on to become such a Hollywood icon. And if you want to watch something really, really beautiful and possibly ugly cry, there's a fantastic film made about Debbie Reynolds and Carrie Fisher and their relationship called Bright Lights. And I think it's called Bright Lights. And it's just lovely. I mean, the two of them were so close. And I've just got to say that the fact that Debbie she passed only a couple of days after Carrie, if not the day after. They were close. So it was really.
Charlie, was that an incredibly clever link there between Bright Lights and lampposts?
Yeah, the lamppost, that's just iconic. Gene Kelly dancing around a lamppost in the Singing in the Rain, his solo dance. Look, I mean,
she wasn't the only one that was wrecked, was she?
No. Don O'Connor, after he did he filmed Make 'Em Laugh, he had to go to bed with exhaustion, only to be like, when he came back a couple of days later to go again. And that dance was so physical, it was ridiculous. But Gene Kelly takes a lot of stick for this, because obviously he did push people hard, but he pushed himself as well. He was sick. He'd got a fever when they filmed the Singing in the Rain dance sequence. And the rumors and the lore around this is so much that it wasn't one take. He didn't do it in one take. It took 3 days to shoot that. And he was wearing a wool suit which shrank in the water. I mean, you can imagine how heavy it must have been as well, because it was soaked with water. And don't worry, it wasn't milky water. There's a whole thing about the water being milk so that you could see it when he was splashing around in it. It was actually backlit, which is even harder to do than mixing milk in with water, because water doesn't show up on screen if you just, if you're lighting it from one direction. It has to be backlit. It's all very complicated. Might have had to be milk in 1927, but it wasn't in 52.
That it was in 1976 when Eric and Ernie did the parody, and they had so many problems trying to shoot that water that in the end they did use milk, and that was voted the best parody by the Radio Times in 2016. I know, because I looked this up.
That's so funny.
I'd got this image of Eric, I was sure I'd seen Eric and Ernie doing it, and of course little old Ern has got the umbrella pulled right down because he's ever so tiny, and Eric just moves from one drain pipe to the next. Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if that is then where the rumor that it was milk on Singing in the Rain came from, because that would be much cheaper than having your cinematographer backlight all the water on the set.
For the Americans listening, go on YouTube and look up Eric Morecambe place and Ernie Wise Singing in the Rain. The two British comedians that you probably won't find funny, but we all roll on the floor laughing every time they do it.
Yeah, we've been conditioned to find them funny every Christmas.
They went to America and it didn't work.
No. But the biggest myth surrounding Singing in the Rain is this Kathy Selden, Lena Lamont versus Debbie Reynolds, Gene Hagen dubbing debate. Because in the film, it's Kathy dubbing Lena. And the rumor is that in reality, it was Hagen dubbing Reynolds. But it's not quite to the extent that the legend would have you believe. The legend's brilliant. The legend is that Debbie Reynolds did not sing a line in the film, and that her singing was in fact done by Gene Hagen, who Debbie Reynolds' character is meant to be dubbing because she can't sing. Unbelievable. I mean,
people loved it.
Isn't that? I mean, I love that. I think that is absolutely fantastic. But that's not quite to that extent. Okay. Hagen didn't dub all of Reynolds' singing, but it was her own voice in one line that Kathy does dub. So they're overdubbing The Dancing Cavalier, and Lena Lamont says, "Our love will last until the stars grow cold." But then she sort of says it with this beautiful melted butter voice. "Our love will last until the stars grow cold." And that's Gene Hagen's own voice, because she was a classically trained actor, and the Lena Lamont voice is put on. Reynolds' singing is dubbed on one song. It's the song "Would You," which is quite a sort of beautiful ballad. And she's dubbed by a singer called Betty Noyes, who is, that's a great name for a singer now, you say it out loud. I wrote it and I didn't see it. Betty Noyes. Fabulous. She was a singer who did a lot of this overdubbing for stars. And she also sang the song "Baby Mine" in Dumbo. Le Sob. Makes me cry every time. Oh, so sad. So yeah, so the mythology that has grown up around Singing in the Rain is just enormous. So there was a little bit of trickery going on whilst the film is talking about that kind of trickery.
The more we look at this, the more layers we can peel back, though, can't we? From the kind of pop eats itself, Hollywood reflecting Hollywood, to the characters portraying themselves, portraying other people, to the way the technology impacted the film. It's like an onion. It's a big onion. It
really is, and it's one of those. The more you know, like a great piece of art. Every time you watch this film, you're going to see something different, and I hope that our listeners who have seen Singing in the Rain and who do love it will go up to their collections, pick it out, watch it again. Having listened to this, I hope that I have made people want to watch it again. But it's just, I learned that Broadway Melody, that little bit within a bit, was a film that came out in the late 30s, and it was the first all color, all talking film from a particular studio. So it had relevance to Singing in the Rain. And we just take it for granted that, it's called Broadway Melody. So it's got all these references. And the more it reveals, as it reveals more through the plot of the film, through the devices it's using, the audience can start to quite rightly question if anything they have seen over the last hour and a bit have been real. So that's why I think Singin' in the Rain is the ultimate Hollywood film about Hollywood, because it reveals just enough about its own world to suggest to you not all is as it seems, whilst not all is as it seems with the film itself. So it's meta.
It's just meta, isn't it? You can't watch it without thinking, yeah, is this Hollywood? Is this how Hollywood was? Charlie, if people are encouraged to go and watch Singing in the Rain, what would you recommend as a follow-up to that?
Oh no, that's such a question. What would I recommend people watch after Singing in the Rain? I'd recommend they watch Some Like It Hot, 'cause it's the greatest film that's ever been made. For more films about Hollywood, okay, another Billy Wilder, watch Sunset Boulevard, because that is about a silent star who was left behind. Maybe we can see that as the Lena Lamont story a few years after the fact, and she's played by Gloria Swanson, who was a silent star. So it's, again, layers upon layers going on in there. Very, very rich for any film fan. For modern musicals, I mean, I loved La La Land. I know there are a lot of people who did not enjoy La La Land. I loved all the references to these MGM musicals of this time. I thought that was brilliant. So they are still making them like that, which is just wonderful. What else can we recommend, guys? Come on, what do you think, Marion? What would you recommend after Singing in the Rain?
Oh, anything with Frank Sinatra, with Fred Astaire, with Bing Crosby, with Gene Kelly, with Bob Hope, the classics, the originals, Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis, any of the original films. All I would say is that if you are of a slightly younger generation, you've watched Tom Holland doing Singing in the Rain, man, have you missed out if you've not seen the film.
Oh, you have to watch Singing in the Rain.
You have to watch Singing.
Please do. And if you are a parent, I think it's your responsibility to sit your child down and make them watch this film. They will thank you for it and be better dinner party guests when they grow up.
They will not put you in a home when you get older.
There are two different kinds of do. There's Baby Shark, do, and there's Singing in the Rain.
Do. We can't afford this song.
Holmes is going nuts. Yeah. Charlie, thank you so much for coming on to give us a history of a brilliant piece of Hollywood history and tell us. I mean, like you say, once you start, you're like, how are we going to fill a whole episode talking about one film? Well, that's how people, boom, mic drop. Done.
We could have talked about this for 3 hours and still not got everything in. So if anyone listening is like, but you didn't talk about this, please just, get in touch and we'll chat more.
Indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
When our guests join us to talk about their work and their new book, the 45 minutes or so they spend with us is just a taster of all their efforts. So to this end, we have launched our very own bookshop on bookshop.org, where you can find our guests' latest and greatest books. You can support them and you can support History Hack too. 10% of every sale via our bookshop supports the podcast and allows us to keep at it and bring you more amazing guests. You can find our bookshop at bookshop.org/shop/History Hack, or just search on bookshop.org for us under the shops bit. Thank you for your continued support, and here's to your next great